The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Chapter 1. Aunt Polly Keeps Her Promise. Tom! Tom! There was no reply. Now where could that boy be? The old woman said as she looked around the room. You had better hope I don't find you, because when I do... Without finishing her sentence, she searched the room and found only the cat under the bed. Then she thought he might be in the garden. Looking out of the window, she shouted, "Thomas Sawyer!" And suddenly she heard something behind her. Quickly turning around, she was just in time to catch a young boy trying to run out of the room. "What were you doing just now? Why didn't you come when you heard me calling you?"
I wasn't doing anything. Really, I wasn't.
Well, how can I believe that when all I have to do is to look at you and see your dirty hands and face? How did you get so dirty?
I don't know, Aunt Polly.
Well, I know. You've been eating junk food again, haven't you? How many times have I had to tell you not to eat sweets? She raised her hand to hit Tom, but just before she brought it down on him, he shouted,
"Hey, there's something behind you!"
And when his aunt turned to look, he ran away as fast as he could out of the house and quickly disappeared from Aunt Polly's sight. Even though she had been so angry with Tom, she couldn't help laughing and saying to herself, "That boy! He's always getting into trouble. I hate to punish him so often, and I really hate to hit him, but sometimes there's nothing else an old woman can do. He doesn't like to work, and he doesn't like to go to school. He doesn't like to do anything but play. But I promised my sister before she died that I would take care of her son and make sure he grows up to be a good man, and I plan to keep that promise. If I find out he hasn't gone to school today, I'll make him work all day Saturday." Of course, Tom did not go to school that day. He played down by the river instead. Later that evening, when he returned home late, his brother, Sid, was finishing his housework. Tom liked Sid, but hated that he was always being a good boy and trying to please Aunt Polly. Sid didn't know how to have fun like Tom did. He was boring. After doing his own housework, Tom sat down to eat. During the meal, his Aunt Polly began to ask questions about his afternoon at school. "Tom, did you bring home any books to study?"
"Yes, Aunt Polly."
"Oh, good. And tell me, did you go swimming today, Tom?" Hearing this, Tom started to fear that she knew about his afternoon.
"No, Aunt Polly. Why do you ask?"
She put her hand on his shirt. Luckily, it was dry, but Tom knew his pants were still wet, and before she could touch them, he quickly said,
"Because of the hot weather, some of us poured water on our heads, to keep cool."
Aunt Polly believed him and was happy to hear he'd been so good. Later that evening, as Tom was out walking and enjoying the warm summer air, he met a stranger. It was a boy, a tall boy, taller than Tom. And he was dressed well, wearing what seemed to be new clothing. He even wore shoes. Tom suddenly felt a little embarrassed about his own clothing. Neither boy spoke. They simply stared at each other and began to walk in a circle, never looking away from the other's face. Tom felt he had to teach this boy a lesson, so he said,
"I could make you cry." "No, you couldn't." "Could. Couldn't. Could." Okay, try.
Tom just looked at him silently for a moment and then said,
I could make you cry like a little girl. Then do it. You think you're so strong. I am. I'm so strong I could beat you with one hand tied behind my back. I'm waiting for you to stop talking and start fighting. I think you're afraid. I'm not. You are. I'm not. You are.
They began to push each other with their shoulders, again moving in a circle. And then, suddenly, they were fighting on the ground, hitting and kicking each other, and pulling hair. But soon, Tom was on top of the new boy, hitting him with his fists.
Have you had enough?
He asked. The boy tried to get away. He was crying angrily.
Have you had enough?
Then the new boy said,
Okay, stop.
Tom got off of him and started to walk away, but as soon as he turned, the boy threw a rock and hit Tom in the back. The boy ran away, but Tom followed him home and waited until the boy's mother came out and yelled at Tom to go away. When Tom arrived at his home, he had to enter through his bedroom window because he was late and he didn't want his Aunt Polly to see him. But his aunt was waiting for him. Sid had told her about Tom's afternoon, and when she saw from his clothes that he'd been fighting, she started to plan all the work Tom would do on Saturday. Chapter 2. Tom learns a lesson about desire. Saturday morning came, and, like all Saturdays, it was bright and sunny. Perfect for going out to play. But Tom had other plans. He was to paint his aunt's fence. Just looking at all the work he had to do made him feel sad. The fence was huge in his eyes. It would take him all day to finish the work. He slowly began by wetting his brush and started moving it along one of the wooden boards. After doing this for a while, he became very bored. And just as he was about to give up, Jim, a boy who worked for the family, came through the gate. He was going to get water. Tom stopped him.
Hey, Jim, why don't you paint and I'll get the water?
Jim said,
No, I can't do that. Oh, don't worry about Aunt Polly. She won't hurt you. I'll give you one of my toys, and I'll show you where I hurt my foot.
Jim took the toy and looked at Tom's foot, but just at that moment, Aunt Polly was returning home. Jim ran off and Tom tried to look busy by painting as fast as possible. But soon, his hands started to move slower and slower as he thought about all of the fun he could be having if he weren't working. He knew that his friends would walk by soon and laugh at him. He wished that he had enough money to pay other boys to come and do the work for him, but he had nothing. Then, suddenly, he had a great idea and he began to work again. The first of his friends to walk by was Ben Rogers. He was eating an apple and pretending to be a riverboat, imitating all kinds of riverboat sounds. A bell.
Ding, ding, ding.
A riverboat worker.
Okay, boys, it's time to slow her down. We're getting near land. Easy now. Turn her slowly.
He shouted.
Slow down. Okay, boys, and stop.
He turned himself and came slowly to a stop near Tom. Tom didn't pay any attention to the boat. He pretended to be interested in his work.
Hi, Tom. Did you get into trouble?
Tom didn't reply. He just kept moving his brush up and down the board.
Do you have to work all day?
Tom turned suddenly.
Oh, hi there, Ben. I didn't see you. I'm going swimming. It's too bad you can't go. You have to work.
Tom looked at him strangely.
Work? What work?
What you're doing now looks a lot like work. Hard work,
Ben said, pointing to the fence. Tom returned to his painting.
Oh, this? Well, I guess what's work for you is fun for Tom Sawyer. Are you saying that you like this? Do I like it? I love it. I wish I could do this more often.
Ben seemed surprised to hear this. He watched Tom for a little while. Tom pretended to be doing a very careful job, painting a little, then stepping back to look at what he had done to make sure it looked okay, making a few corrections and then continuing to the next board. The more Ben watched, the more interested he became.
Tom, let me paint a little.
Tom thought for a moment and then said,
Sorry, Ben. This fence has to be painted perfectly. It takes a special person to do it well. Please, Tom, let me try. I'll give you part of my apple. No, Ben. I'm sorry, but... Okay, you can have the whole apple.
Hearing this, Tom gladly traded Ben the brush for the apple and sat down under a tree to think of other ways to get more help. Soon, Tom had more and more boys painting for him. They had laughed when they first saw Ben painting, but soon realized how excited he was to be doing the work. So they became equally as excited and were soon asking Tom for a brush. But Tom had said no until they started to offer to pay him. At the end of the day, he had been given a cat with one eye, a piece of broken glass, different kinds of toys, and many other things. Tom was rich. Soon the fence was finished, and Tom had painted none of it himself. This made him realize something very useful in life. Men will desire anything they think they can't easily have. Chapter 3. Tom in the Army. A new love is discovered. When Tom went to tell Aunt Polly he had finished the work, she was sitting beside an open window, half asleep and holding a cat. She was surprised to see him. She thought he had given up hours ago. "You've already finished. How is that possible?"
Really, Auntie, it's all done.
She went to look at the fence, and seeing that he had told her the truth, she said, "Well now, you're a hard worker when you want to be, Tom Sawyer. You can go play now, but come home early. And you can take an apple with you if you want." Tom ran into the kitchen and, after looking at the apple for a moment, picked up a piece of cake instead and ran out to look for his friends. Tom found them getting ready to play war, and they chose Tom to be the leader of one of the armies. His friend, Joe Harper, was the leader of the other army. When the battle began, Tom and Joe sat under a tree and shouted commands to their soldiers. It was a bloody battle, and like most wars, no army was a clear winner. But the boys enjoyed themselves and agreed to meet again another day for more fighting. On his way home, Tom passed Jeff Thatcher's house, and there he saw, for the first time, a beautiful blue-eyed and yellow-haired girl playing in the garden. Love was not a new feeling for Tom. Last week, he had been in love with a girl named Amy Lawrence, but now she had been totally replaced by this new girl. He couldn't stop watching her as she played, but suddenly he saw that she was looking at him and he pretended that he hadn't noticed her. He tried to seem cool, walking on his hands, jumping and running about. But she lost interest and started to walk toward the house. Tom suddenly became sad, but was quickly made happy again when he saw her throw a flower over the fence. Tom slowly walked over to where the flower was, looked around, and, after seeing that no one was looking, picked it up and put it under his shirt, next to his heart. He went home feeling excited. His aunt wondered what he could be so happy about. She hoped that it wasn't anything he could get into trouble for. Unfortunately, later that evening, his brother Sid took some sweets, but his aunt thought Tom had taken them, so she hit Tom instead of Sid. And later, when she discovered that she was wrong, she didn't apologize to Tom. This made him feel very sad. He wished he would die, so she would feel sorry. He liked the idea of her crying over his dead body. So, he left his home and went down to the river. Looking at the water, he wondered if it would hurt to drown. Then, he remembered his flower and took it from under his shirt. He wondered how the new girl would feel if he died. Would she cry, or would she just continue to play in her garden, as if nothing happened? The idea seemed bittersweet to him. He thought about it for a while, and then started to walk back home. He stopped near the Thatcher house. Was that room with the light on her room? He sat under the window and imagined laying down and dying right there and her finding his body the next morning. And in the middle of this thought, the window above him suddenly opened. He could hear the housekeeper talking to someone, and then he felt water being poured from the window on top of him. Tom jumped up and ran. He was terribly wet. And when his brother, Sid, saw him enter through the bedroom window, he didn't say anything because of Tom's angry face. But he planned to tell his aunt all about it the next morning. Chapter 4. Sunday Classes at the Church. The sun rose over a quiet world and looked warmly down upon the peaceful village. That morning, all of the families began their day by praying together. After saying his morning prayers with his family, Tom studied the Bible, because today he had to go to Sunday school. Tom was trying to remember 5 of the shortest sentences in the book, so he could say them in class. And, with help from Aunt Polly's daughter, Mary, he soon learned them. After this, she helped him to put on his nice Sunday clothes. He was disappointed that she made him wear shoes. He hated shoes. And he hated his church lessons, but Mary and Sid loved them. When he came to the church entrance, he saw a friend there and asked him,
"Billy, do you have a yellow ticket?"
Yes.
"I'll buy it from you."
How much will you pay?
Billy accepted Tom's offer and gave him the ticket. And for the next 10 minutes, Tom bought more and more tickets, some blue, some red, from other boys he met at the door. Children were given tickets for learning Bible sentences. Blue meant that 2 sentences had been learned, red meant 20, and yellow meant 200. If a student had 10 yellow tickets, he would win a Bible. It was a great honor to win this. Although Tom didn't really care about having a new Bible, he loved the idea of being the only student to get it. At the beginning of class, the teacher told the children to be good, sit up straight, and listen carefully. Tom noticed 3 men and a woman enter the classroom while the teacher was talking. The woman had a child with her. It was the new girl whom he had seen the other day. He wanted her to see him, so he started to hit and play with his friends sitting near him. The teacher asked the 5 new people to come to the front of the class and then introduced them to the students. Everyone knew the first man, Mr. Thatcher, because he was from the same village, but the other gentleman was his brother, Judge Thatcher. He had just moved to this village with his family, and he was a very interesting man who had traveled to many different parts of the world. That day, in order to impress Judge Thatcher, the teacher hoped a student would come to class with 10 yellow tickets. But, of course, this was not something that happened often. He didn't really expect this to happen. He just hoped he might be lucky. Looking around the room, he saw that none of the students had enough tickets. He became disappointed. But then, Tom Sawyer approached him holding 9 yellow tickets, 9 red tickets, and 10 blue tickets. The teacher's dream had come true. And it was even more surprising that it was Tom Sawyer who had them. He never expected Tom to learn more than 10 sentences in his whole life. The boys who had sold their tickets to Tom felt terribly jealous now. They wished they had kept them. They had been tricked by Tom so many times that the only thing they could feel now was anger. Tom felt proud standing next to the judge. He was also very nervous. Not because the judge was a great man, but because he was the father of that beautiful blue-eyed and yellow-haired girl. The judge then spoke to him.
"What's your name, son?" "Tom." "But don't you have another name, a last name?" "Tell the gentleman your full name, Thomas,"
said the teacher.
"Thomas Sawyer. You must be a fine young man for learning so many sentences. Those sentences will be useful for you for the rest of your life. By learning more and more, you'll one day become a great man, son. And then you can remember this day, and you'll be so happy that you attended your church lessons. Now, Thomas, share with us some of the things you've learned from your study of the Bible. For instance, tell us the names of the first 2 followers of Jesus Christ."
Tom suddenly became frightened and embarrassed. He looked at his feet. The teacher knew that Tom had not really learned all of those sentences, but asked Tom to answer the judge's question anyway.
"Answer the gentleman, Thomas. Don't be afraid."
Tom remained silent. "You can tell me," said the lady. "The names of the first 2 followers of Jesus Christ were—" Tom thought of 2 names from the book. He wasn't sure who they were or what they had done, but he knew that they were very popular names and that the names always appeared together.
"David and Goliath."
This, of course, was terribly wrong, because although David and Goliath were from the Bible, they hadn't been followers of Jesus Christ. David was a young boy, and Goliath was a huge man of very great size and strength. But when they fought, even though David was much smaller, he managed to kill Goliath. Let us move on to the next part of the story in order to save Tom from further embarrassment.